right, so once again, just so you guys can see, you're going to be doing 4 different designs in each one of these wedges, okay? So we're not repeating this yet. We're just trying to figure out what design do we want to make our final, okay? So you want to just give yourself 4 different options in these, okay? Don't worry about how we're going to make the final design. I will show that to you at another time. We just need to get these 4 done. This one, like I said, right here is finished. These 2 I'm working on, okay? You do not have to feel like you have to finish one wedge here before you start another one. If you want to, you can work on 2 or 3 or all 4 at the same time. Does not matter, okay? But what I will tell you is that, again, you're going to repeat. Even though I'm using just 3 letters, I'm going to repeat. I'm going to use my S multiple times, my G multiple times, and my M multiple times. So they're not just going to be used once, okay? I have to use them more than once because I need to fill up the space, okay? Notice how filled this is also, too. This is going to look a bit crowded. Now, we don't want it to be too crowded, but just enough to make it work, okay? All right, so what I like to do, and I'll show you how I start these. I'm actually going to flip this upside down. I like to start with just one letter, but a big letter. So what I'm going to do, did the G last, or no, I did the, I'm going to start with the G first, okay? And what you're going to do, so I'm going to start with, here's my G page. I am going to go ahead and use the biggest G that I have there, and I am going to put this underneath my sketch sheet here, okay? So go ahead and pick out which letter you'd like to start off with first. And go ahead and select the largest one that's right there in the middle to start with, okay? This will be a good place for us to start. Now, you don't have to do your other ones like this, but I just want to get you guys started so you can get a feel for how this works. Now, here's the neat thing about this. You do not have to make this G, or your first letter, right side up. You can go upside down if you want to, and I'm actually going to do that because I like the bottom part of the G best. And I'm going to kind of plant this in the point of my wedge, or the point of the triangle, either way you want to look at it. And when I'm doing this, you can see the G through your paper, okay? And so you'll notice that I'm not actually including the whole J or G. I'm just including the bottom part of the G. So again, I want it to look like the letter is getting cut off on the sides. So once I figure out where I want to put it, then I'm just going to basically trace it, okay? And again, mechanical pencil is the way to go. This will probably be the only project I actually recommend using these for. When you trace this, you want to be very nice and neat. If you're tracing and it looks sloppy, it is going to come back and haunt you when you go to make your final design, and it'll be even worse for you when you try to paint, okay? Now, some of this G, like this little point here on the end, is kind of thin. So again, I am going to go ahead and make it thicker so that it makes it easier for me to paint in that area. So anything that's too thin, I am going to thicken up. And I'm just going to do that while I'm tracing. So there I have my first letter. And again, I'm only using part of the G there. Most of it's getting cut off, and that's fine. Now, once I get that first letter, now what I want to do, I don't want to get too stuck on just one letter. I'm going to go ahead and switch, and I'm going to try my M this time. So I'm going to just put my G sheet off to the side. Now I've got my M sheet. Now, I don't want to use the biggest letter this time. Again, I got to think about variety here. So maybe I'll just come up here and I'll use one of these kind of medium-sized letters. And again, I want to choose a different style. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this Gothic style letter. But when you look at this, and you can see this, there are some thin lines on this. So I might actually just take this line out and not include it at all because it's obviously too thin to paint. It's not, I need shapes, not a line. And this whole area right here, I'm probably just going to fill in. So I'm just going to treat this all as just one filled in shape. So that way, again, I'm not stuck painting this really thin section right here. I'll probably have to thicken up some of these little points here, that, there, too, when I trace. So again, I'm going to put my sketch sheet on top of my letter, and I'm going to go ahead and go and work again in this point. Now you'll notice that, again, if you want this design to turn out really cool, guys, you need to kind of be heavy with your letters along this part of the wedge, the triangle part. So the sides all the way down to the point. That's where you're going to get the cool stuff happening. I'm just going to kind of find a good place to put this. Once I'm good, I'm going to start tracing. But what I need to decide, though, too, do I want this M to be on top or do I want it to be on the bottom? I'm going to go ahead and make this look like it's underneath my G. So I need to make sure that I do not trace over top of the G. So now I'm going to trace. And again, I am going to thicken up anything that looks too skinny to paint. I'm also eliminating some parts of this because, again, there's a lot of thin parts. So yes, I am changing the look of this letter because of some of these changes, and that's fine. When you're finished with this design, when it's all painted and done, you're not going to necessarily be able to read, you're not going to read your name. Let's see that. Okay. So you're not going to see your name when it's all done. It's just going to look like a bunch of really interesting shapes. So there's that M. And so I'm just going to keep going. So I've used the M. Now I'm going to try my S. And you'll see on this design that I'm working on, right now it is feeling very symmetrical. And a lot of times when I start these, they do feel more symmetrical. But at some point, I do try to make it feel more asymmetrical because, again, I don't want to get too caught up in making everything too matchy-matchy. So I always try to have one side of my wedge heavier with letters than the other. And you can see that on the one that I'm finished with right here, I've left that space right there empty. And it's nice to kind of leave some of those empty spaces. So that I'm just going to leave alone. So it's really heavy over here and there, but I've got an empty space there, and that's fine. But in this design right here, I used my M quite a lot. It's kind of hard to see, though, but I probably used it 4 or 5 times. I did S probably 3 times. And then my G even probably more. So you're going to find you're going to have to use your S more than once, your M more than once, you know, your each letter is going to have to be used more than once. And again, just make sure, get yourself in the habit of every time you do a new letter, like a new S or whatever you're using, use a different style and different size. So I'm going to try. See, and again, feel free. You can put these letters on their side, upside down. And again, every time you're doing this, you want to make sure that you decide, you want this letter on top or on the bottom? You should not be making your letters look like they are transparent. And again, perfectly fine to skip over some of those thin areas or to thicken them up. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and try to use my S again. And again, for those of you who aren't sure if you want your letters to go past the round part of your edge, of your wedge, you can go ahead and let them go past it. You can decide even after you paint it if you want to cut them off or if you want to keep them. So again, now that you guys have your own letters, you can work on these designs at home. All you need, if you're having a hard time seeing through the paper, is a window and sunlight. So just kind of take a chair, pull it up next to a window that you have, and just trace. So I've already used an S twice, but again, it was a different style and a different size. I just kind of keep moving those letters around until I find an interesting spot for them. Your goal on this, guys, is not to let this look like it is alphabet soup when you're finished with it. You definitely need to design to the shape that you're given, which is this wedge. So think of ways of how you can kind of orient and position these letters so that it creates an interesting design. But you don't want to just go into this thinking, you know, I'm just going to randomly put these anywhere, because if you do that, you will end up making it look like it's alphabet soup. And it's just not going to turn out too well. So make sure you are really putting some time and effort into thinking about where you're placing these before you actually start tracing. So I've already used my S 3 times here. Probably need to switch it up, try something different. Okay, so I'm just going to keep working on these. Again, you know, give yourself plenty of options. Make sure that you're thinking about where you're putting these before you actually start tracing them, so you don't end up with alphabet soup in the end. Make sure that every time you use a letter, you're choosing a different style and a different size for each of the letters that you're using. Make sure you're making the letters look like they're cut off here along the triangle part of the wedge. And then make sure again that you're going for, you know, an asymmetrical design. Don't set yourself up for a tough time with a symmetrical one. Try something different. But this is what you guys need to be working on for this weekend. And then when you come back here for Monday, we are going to decide which one you are going to use for your final.